icons of television on the TV guide covers you've got behind you?
Yeah, well, I have about a couple of thousand in my guest bedroom too. So these are just a few that I had framed.
I've got one here.
Oh yeah, I see. Okay, you know those folks.
Yes.
Well, Gareth Neame, Downton Abbey is you're I think right at the tail end of wrapping up production on this series. Tell us kind of where you are right now. What episode number are you shooting?
Well, we're shooting episodes 7 and 8 of the 6th season, so we have yeah, we're definitely in the tail end, but we've got the big finale still to do.
When I talked to Julian a couple of weeks ago, he said he still had not written the finale. Is that in everybody's hands now?
Well, a little bit of hyperbole. I mean, he has been working on it for a while, and we have a draft, but you know, we're still very much you know, still it's underway, and it's certainly under wraps. We haven't shown it to the actors yet.
Oh, okay. Still internal at this point.
Yeah.
Tell us now. Whenever you wrap up anything in life, whether it's a job or whether it's a relationship or you're moving to a new city or whatever, it can be lots of emotions going on. What's the feeling right now from everybody?
Well, I think it's only just beginning to dawn on people that the end is nigh. I don't think it's going to really sink in until we shoot each actor's final scene, or we, for example, shoot the last scene at Highclere Castle or at Ealing Studios, where we do a lot of our sets. So I think, you know, and I think as you applaud off each character as they do their last scene, I think that would be quite moving.
Going back to the beginning, I was wondering, you know, sometimes parts are easy to cast and sometimes it takes you a little bit of a search. What was the hardest one as you all were putting this together?
I don't remember a hard part to cast. And in fact, I've been on record before as saying that the first season of this show went so smoothly that I was certain it was going to be a flop. It just was too harmonious and straightforward. The casting process on this show was about making straight offers to very, very well-known actors, be that Maggie Smith and Penelope Wilton and Hugh Bonneville, and actors who are well-known. And our casting director, Jill Trevelyan, searching for people really at the very beginning of their career. Laura Carmichael, who plays Lady Edith, which is one of the characters we've most seen evolve over these 6 seasons. This was her first job. You know, she had trained as an actress, but she was working in a doctor's office at the time that we made the offer to her. And Lily James, pretty much the first thing that Lily has done. Sophia McShearer is another one. So there were junior actors at the beginning of their career who we had to audition, and very senior actors who we made straight offers to, and it all came together very, very comfortably. I think you can't, for me, when I watch the show and we're working on it, I don't really see a tremendous difference between, you know, I think it works very organically, the way that the likes of Dame Maggie Smith, one of the most respected actors in the world, alongside somebody who's really at the beginning of their career. I think it seems to me to be quite seamless.
When you do have those newcomers, and I'm thinking of like a Lily James who's, you know, burst on the movie scene this year, is it kind of like, are you kind of like a proud father when you see all of your folks going off to other projects and doing well?
It's very satisfying, and particularly Lily James in Cinderella, but actually Sophia McShearer, of course, played alongside her as one of the ugly sisters. I was looking at a clip where where Lily's character, Rose, is engaged in season 5, and just looking at that scene and how beautifully she did it. Having subsequently seen Cinderella, I could see why she made such a great Cinderella. It's just all there in our show.
You know, you've got a great cast, as we've all seen all these years, and I'm wondering, because they were, you know, some of them were at the SAG Awards the past couple of times when they won, but you weren't on stage. What was your reaction to seeing them win the best TV drama ensemble at SAG Awards twice?
Yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled by that. I'm the producer of essentially a foreign show. No foreign show has ever won in that category. You know, that is the most prestigious award, apart from perhaps the sole actor and sole actress. That is the prestigious award. And I'm not saying Downton Abbey is the best show on television. Maybe it is, but I tell you what, it's the best ensemble show on television, and that's why our cast, having won that award twice now, I think is so well deserved. When you think that very few of those actors were known to TV Academy voters and to Guild voters at the time that the show first hit American television screens, these actors have become very well known now, and I think people our cast aren't winning awards or being nominated because of a long-term respect or an affinity for them, but perhaps with the sole exception of Maggie. Largely, this is just actors that American Academy members have come to know and respect them in this show, and I think there's no finer way to be nominated or to win an award.
I've enjoyed Dame Maggie Smith for decades. What is she like off when she's not on camera?
Well, when she's not on camera, she tends to go home, and what she does there, but she's. I mean, I think we all feel that it is a privilege to work with people who have these careers that we've just grown up, and Maggie Smith is one of those actresses for whom there's a body of work that is inspirational when you decide to work in this business. And I mean, my connection with her is unusual because my late grandfather directed The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. That was her first Oscar win, and if you look back at that film, that is you just see this is somebody who, well, if you look back at it now, you see somebody who we know has had an amazing 40, 50 career since then. But it's all in that performance. That's an extraordinary performance, and all the things that we grew up watching her do. And I went to school with her sons, as it happened. So I've been sort of connected with Maggie and her family for most of my life, and to work with her in this role, I've described her before as being almost like a muse to Julian Fellowes. There's such a synchronicity in what he writes and how she performs it without, as he said before, without any degree of sentimentality. And she, in the way that Julian's writing is so deft, the way that it goes from something that's melodramatic or moving to a laugh out loud funny gag. I think Maggie Smith's performance it's just a delicious interpretation of what Julian's writing.
Going back to the very beginning, I know I've heard you talk about this before, but maybe not in the context I'm about to ask. How did it get started? I mean, what was the initial kernel there that made you want to do it?
Well, I think I first admired Julian's work when I watched Gosford Park, and I thought that was I didn't know him at the time. I went to a screening at BAFTA in London, and I was very impressed by the way that way of life had been depicted. And I didn't meet him until a few years later, and we started talking about things we might do together. And then, eventually I said to him, look, could I ever persuade you to go back to that territory and create an episodic television series, but in that world? And, I've talked about this many times before, so if anyone who's listening has heard it, I'm not going to bore everyone by going over all the old ground, but I think he was a little reluctant to go back to that territory. I left the meeting not really knowing what was going to happen, and about 2 or 3 weeks later I received an email from him, and he'd set out most of the characters that came to be in the show. So I think he was taken with the idea, and we pitched it to ITV in the UK, which is not the network that you might expect to find this show, because we really did have an ambition to reinvent this genre. It's a very it's a perennial favorite for British audiences, but it's tended to be done in quite a conservative way. Costume drama has usually been literary and from adaptations of books, and what we wanted to do was a very modern show that was fast-paced with lots of characters, albeit in a setting 80, 90 years ago. So we were actually breaking new ground, and received support for it right from day one. So that's why, as I was saying earlier on, making the first season was pretty straightforward. Actually, everyone got the idea and backed the vision that we had from the show from the beginning. And because we've made every episode since. That vision, I think, has been hasn't been challenged or kind of mucked around with since then. Julian is able to write what he wants to write.
When you first got to the Emmy Awards after that first season aired here in America, did extremely well. It was in the miniseries categories the first time around, because it wasn't. I think when you're doing all the paperwork, it still wasn't set yet that it was a second season.
Yeah.
But anyway, what were your expectations as you all got there that night? What were you thinking? What were you? I know what you were hoping, but what were you thinking was going to happen?
Well, it was a strange one, really. I mean, we have a huge amount to be grateful to the TV Academy. We sent out screeners. That was a considerable financial investment, actually, for a show on public television with a much smaller budget than many of the other shows in contention. And a big show, big miniseries in the year that we won, of course, was Mildred Pierce. Brilliant Kate Winslet piece on HBO, and that was really what everyone was predicting to win. But when we were running the campaign, we were aware that there was quite low level of awareness in the United States for our show. It was on public television, not really a massive destination of choice for mainstream drama. And it's the members of the TV Academy who watched the screeners, who spread by the word of mouth. It was people like you who watched it and saw it was offering something fresh and different and hopefully very well made. And it was TV commentators and journalists and voting members of the TV Academy. And we won a plethora of awards the first year in the miniseries category. When we came, so that was August, I think, in 2011, August 2011. When we came back in the January for the Golden Globes, it was really interesting, the difference that everyone by this point seemed to know the show. Of course, now it's hard to realize that there was a time where the show had quite a low level of recognition because it was a sort of slow burn, and audiences increased across the first 3 years to making it one of the highest rated shows in America.
It's funny. I remember getting that screener early that summer, and there's so much television, as you well know now. I mean, several hundred channels, and as somebody was telling me yesterday, and I totally agree, it feels like the golden age of television with the wide variety and the quality. But I remember getting that screener thinking, oh, I meant to watch this a few months ago, and I'll give you the best compliment I can when I'm watching a show, at least. If I can't wait to watch the next episode, if I watch a whole series like in a weekend, that to me is a high compliment, because sometimes you get a show and it's just like you hardly even want to move on to the next episode. But anyway, I think a lot of people here felt that way when they sat down to watch it, like, oh, I meant to watch this, and then they couldn't get enough of it.
Well, that's great, isn't it? And there's plenty of other shows which are slower burns like that people come to a little bit later, and it's actually quite a good way of doing business, because people have to pay to catch up. I mean, most people, like your good self, don't get given free screeners, so it's actually quite a good business model when people have to catch up. But we were delighted that so many, not only industry people, but mainstream TV audiences caught up with the show, and it became just such a cherished thing. I mean, the support from the United States of the show is really, really overwhelming, and I know it means a tremendous amount to all of the actors and the producers, all of the cast and crew. It really does, and particularly as we come into the final year, we don't take these things at all for granted.
And this summer, you're on the Emmy ballot, obviously, for this most recent season, which I thoroughly enjoyed. In fact, I told people I thought this might have been the best season. I was really excited about the storylines that were offered, and things just moved along at such a fast pace. Tell me maybe just a particular plot or storyline that you were just really thrilled the way it turned out from this past season.
Well, I think a lot of focus would go on to the Edith story. This is the ugly duckling from season 1. The also ran of the 3 sisters. By season 5, this is a woman who is on fire. This is a woman who's becoming a professional woman. She's had talk about learning from the school of hard knocks. Everything has gone wrong for this young woman, and yet she keeps plowing on. And I think the storyline of, she tries to make arrangements for the good of Marigold and for the good of her and her family. She makes certain arrangements which don't really work, and eventually she knows that the strength of a mother's love for her child is what takes over. And I just think the way that Edith takes back her own child is a really important and very moving story. I thought beautifully acted. Another one that means a lot to me, and I just think is evidence of the sophistication of Julian's writing, is the wonderful storyline where Mary decides to test out Tony Gillingham. She has a test drive with him in a hotel, and they have this illicit assignment. I like the fact that we're depicting that for Mary, forming a second relationship as an older woman now, as a woman who's now into her 30s, as many people will know, forming a second marriage, a second relationship when you're older is much more complicated than the ease with which you can fall into an early relationship. And I like the way that we've depicted that. But specifically, it's the way that Violet's very bitchy butler discovers the truth and spills the beans, and Violet finds out that her granddaughter has disgraced herself by an illicit assignation with a man she's not married to. And at the very point that's all coming out, and that Violet challenges Mary about that, of course, it's exactly the same time that we're finding out about Violet's past and the fact that she nearly left her husband all those decades ago for this Russian prince. And I think the way those two stories dovetail together just made that really delicious. The idea that season 5 not only has a lot of present concerns like Edith's child, but also it's the secrets that we have, in our past. It's the thing, it's the way that Mary and Violet are connected, and they're more like each other than they are unlike each other.
Yeah, and on the Edith storyline, ultimately when her mother finds out, played by Elizabeth McGovern, I think we kind of pretty much expected that sort of reaction. I mean, she was going to not like it, but she was going to come on board with it pretty fast. I don't think we expected Robert to be as okay. I guess that was at the very, very tail end when he sort of figures it out. But I love the fact that even back, 80 and 90 years ago, that even though almost any other male in the world would not have had that reaction, he was resigned to it.
Yeah, there's a very strong air of pragmatism in Robert, I think. Although he's a traditionalist and he's a custodian of something from the past that he has to keep going, he's pragmatic, I think. And I also think enough bad things have happened, things that would have probably given Robert Grantham a heart attack in the first season. But let's not forget, by this point, Mary's husband has been killed. Sybil has run off with one of his employees and eloped, and so many things have happened to this family that have made him have to accept the modern world, albeit perhaps unwillingly. And he already knew earlier on, a few seasons ago, that the idea of Mary marrying Sir Richard Carlisle because he was the right sort of figure, but she wasn't in love with him. He knew that was the wrong thing, and I think he gave Mary similar sort of advice then. The lovely line that Hugh Bonneville often talks about, because he really enjoyed the scene where he says to Mary, go off to America, go to the Wild West and marry a cowboy. And I think by the time that Edith delivers yet another to bombshell to him in season 5, I think he just wants her happiness, and he accepts the situation as it is, and he knows it's not ideal, and but the child happened because she was in love with Michael Gregson, and it was legitimate and genuine, and so of course his love for his daughter is what conquers all.
I'm not doing my job if I don't at least ask, can you give us any tidbits at all about this final season that you're shooting?
Well, you all say that. And I was saying the other day at a talk in Los Angeles that, for anyone who celebrates Christmas, if you said to your children on the 1st of December, would you would you like to open your presents now? The kids would all say, yes, please. And half an hour later, they'd all be crying because they know they would have spoiled their treat. So there is so little we really can say about it. And, you know, it's a final season, so it's our last opportunity to show what happens to these people. I don't think they're all going to have definite, finite endings, because people don't end until their lives are over, and they're not all going to die at the end of the show. But it will be a season where our camera eventually moves away from the scene and leaves Downton Abbey as it is, and we'll leave it at the time we choose to leave it. So I think audiences have everything to, I mean, audiences love these characters. And I think that on the ballot, there are many shows that are very respected and enjoyed, but there seems to be a sort of overwhelming love for this show. It's really is people's pleasure. And it's all about character, like with any serial drama. And in fact, when I look at the other shows in contention, you know, all the best of the other shows are all character pieces. There are 20 to 25 amazing characters in this show. There's any number of people that Academy voters and audiences generally can root for and get behind. And I think people are going to be really excited to see where they end up.
Well, I've got to say, after I posted Julian's interview, and the headline was something about, you know, Julian Fellows discusses final season of Downton Abbey or whatever, I had several friends on my Facebook. No, they didn't know. They just, no, please don't. They can't end this. And what can you do about it? Which, of course, I can't do anything about it. So I think there will be a very much an enjoyment of this final season, but also a lamenting of the fact that it is leaving.
I think so. I mean, it's bittersweet for those of us involved in making it. And you know, in so many ways, I'd love to go make the show for another 4 years. You know, we absolutely love making it. We love that audiences love it because we enjoy the show so much. But I think, you know, that there is a shelf life for these shows. And you know, the wrong thing is to think you're in a good place and just keep going. I think you have to, ideally, you get out while you're ahead. You get out a season or two early, which is what I think we're doing, while people don't want you to leave the stage, rather than people being glad to see the back of you. Hopefully we will produce, you know, 6 seasons of a great standard. And in fact, it was great to hear you say that you think season 5 was the best yet, because, you know, if we can, you know, keeping these shows in great health, you know, as they become more seasoned, it is, you know, that's a challenge, and it's very satisfying if we can do that. I think you can't get enough of the show, because the more you invest in these characters, the more you enjoy their development. I mean, you know, we're seeing their children now grow up. You know, these little characters, Marigold and Sibby and George. You know, they're people, and you have this sense of a real family that's getting older together, and they feel so real. The death of Matthew was like, you know, given that episode was aired on Christmas night in Britain, it felt like 10 million households. You know, somebody was knocking at the door with bad news at 11 p.m. on Christmas Day. You know, it's a show about a family, so people treat them like a family, and you know, to let go of those characters is going to be difficult for those of us who love making the show and those of us who love watching it.
Well, that's why ultimately I think over my life, I've loved television way more than movies, because you do invest in people over a long stretch of time, and you invite them into your home and they become part of your family.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, that was exactly the pitch with I originally made to Julian Fellows was, you know, Gosford Park is a great film in many, many ways. It's very entertaining and enjoyable, and it's an absolutely pitch perfect depiction of that way of life, but it's a 120-minute movie, and you don't. It is that association we have with characters that, you know, and I think, as you know, as a viewer, I find it challenging sometimes, because I do binge watch. It suits my lifestyle that I can watch, you know, the other shows that we're against. I can watch them very, very quickly, but you do, you know, you definitely lose that. The few days of gestation that when we used to watch television in a more linear way, you know, that way that you can watch a show for, you know, 10 weeks or whatever it might be, and feel that they're kind of, these characters are percolating in your mind, and that you're living with them, and you're thinking about what you watched in the last episode, and you're anticipating the next one. Of course, to a degree, a lot of that goes with this binge viewing, and these shows become like very long movies. But there are, of course, other great advantages of binge viewing as well.
Yeah, as we wrap up here, I'm totally in agreement with you. I don't dislike binge viewing or the idea of it, but I do, because I do it too. I do it all the time. But I do enjoy like something like yours, where over the course of a week you do think about, I wonder if this means this, or I wonder if this is going to happen, or I can't wait to see, and you have that period of time, which I've always enjoyed with television.
Yes, I agree.
Listen, thank you so much, Gareth. Good luck on the Emmy nominations over in July, and maybe a few more wins in September, and as you wrap up the series here in production.
Thank you so much, and thanks for all your support.